Welcome back everybody. In today's video, I'm going to be comparing two ambers once again. Last week I did a video comparing two amber fragrances, but when I went to sit down to film the video, I somehow got it in my head that the request had been to compare Absolute Aphrodisiac with Ombre 114 by Histoire de Parfum. And when I was going back through my video list notes, I realized that actually they had asked me to compare Absolute Aphrodisiac with Musc Ravageur by Frederic Malle. So I'm going to do that today, and what I'll do is I'll talk about Musc Ravageur, and I won't revisit all of the detail that I talked about in relation to Absolute Aphrodisiac. And if you are interested in hearing those thoughts, if you haven't seen that video, then I recommend going and watching that video. But what I will do is I will talk about Musc Ravageur in the context of comparing it to Absolute Aphrodisiac. And before I get started, I just want to talk about Musc Ravageur a little bit generally for a moment. Musc Ravageur, to me, falls into a category of amber fragrances that I call animal fur amber fragrances. So ambers that have kind of an animal fur, slightly animalic sense to them. Now, just to be clear, I don't think that having an animal fur or animalic bent to something means that it smells dirty per se. And I would say that these fragrances that I'm about to mention don't, in my opinion, smell dirty, but they do have a natural animal, natural human body warmth to them. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because last week when I did that video, I brought in other fragrances that I compared or grouped with the two fragrances that I had been comparing. And today I'm not going to do that necessarily in as much detail, but for the purposes of giving you a comparison, for me, there are three fragrances in my collection that I can think of off the top of my head that fall into that animal fur sort of category. And they are Musc Ravageur, Tiger by Her Side by Jardin, which I will talk a little bit about here too, and Bengal Rouge, of course, which I already spoke about in that video last week. And Poppy's just running up and down the stairs because she can't decide which room she wants to be in today. Okay, so Musc Ravageur, I don't have a full bottle of this. I have a little 10ml travel size, which this particular one was gifted to me by a subscriber a little while ago, which was extremely generous because it was basically full when she sent it to me, so I've used up most of it. And I do actually have another 10ml travel vial of this because last year I think I bought one of these in a sale or something. It might have been a Selfridges sale, and so I do actually have another one of these. So I don't think I'll ever need to upgrade to a full bottle. And I will say that now that I've been wearing this quite a bit and I've become quite familiar with many other amber fragrances in my wardrobe this year because I haven't been buying new perfume, I feel like as much as I do enjoy this, and there was a time when I wanted or lusted after getting a full bottle of this, I don't think I will now because I think there are other ambers that I prefer to wear over this one, even though this is very, very nice. I also have another 10 mils of this, so it's taken me quite a while to get through this, so I imagine that it's probably going to take a while for me to get through the next one as well. All right, so that's enough rambling. How does it smell? So when I first spray this on, if I'm comparing it to Absolute Aphrodisiac by Initio Parfums, then I have to say that like Bengal Rouge and Ombre 114, as I talked about last week, this is a lot more resinous than Absolute Aphrodisiac and is not nearly as sweet as Absolute Aphrodisiac. When I first spray this on, I get something very cooling in the opening. I want to say almost menthol-y, but menthol doesn't seem like the right word. Perhaps camphorous would be a better word because menthol-y sort of implies mintiness to me, but really all it is it's a or maybe it's aromatic, but it's sort of like a cooling sensation, and there's that crispness to it, which I guess is kind of mentholy, but I don't know what it is in the opening. In fact, it's been a long time since I've looked at the notes. Perhaps I should look at the notes. Should I look at the notes? Let's look at the notes. Ah, okay, it's lavender. So there is lavender in the opening to this, which makes a lot of sense. So it is sort of like that very cool, aromatic, almost camphorous kind of lavender smell that I get in the opening of Musc Ravageur, along with, you know, that hit of ambery spices and resins. As the name would imply, this is also quite musky as well. And I remember when I first tried this years ago, my first impression was that I didn't like it because I thought the musk in it was kind of a bit of a dirty musk. And whilst I'll say that it's not super clean, laundry fresh type of musk that you get in a lot of clean musky fragrances, this isn't nearly as animalic and funky as I once thought it was. It mostly smells really warm. So think of a clean cat or a freshly washed dog. You know, they still have that fluffy, almost dusty kind of animal smell to their fur, but it doesn't smell skanky. It doesn't smell off-putting. It's actually really warm and inviting, I think. Like I said before, it smells very resinous, and after about 20 minutes, I feel like I get a bit of a smokiness happening in here as well, which I definitely do not get in Absolute Aphrodisiac, I don't think. Did I say I had smokiness? I don't think there is. It's not really strong, and you definitely don't smell like a campfire or anything like that, but there is just a hint of smokiness, which just gives it, I think, a bit more shadow and makes it, you know, again, blending in with those musky sort of animalic tones, it just gives it a beautiful softness in a way, but also a bit of mystique. This has that beautiful, warm, cozy, fluffy amber quality to it. And there is sweetness in here, but it's almost like the sweetness stems more from the resins and a bit of that benzoin rather than being sort of an artificial sugary sweetness or even a vanilla per se, even though I think a lot of people tout this as a vanilla-y amber. And there is vanilla in here, of course there is, but I pick it up more as, I actually sort of get the image of resins that are kind of tacky and caramelized. That's the sort of sweetness that I get in here. And it is a bit sweet, but it's not sort of punchy sweetness. And again, like Ombre 114, like Bengal Rouge, I find this to be more of a natural smelling fragrance compared to Absolute Aphrodisiac, which definitely has a more synthetic, very loud, very look at me, notice me kind of element to it. And as I said, there's definitely a bit of funk without being dirty, which I don't think Absolute Aphrodisiac has, even with that castoreum note. My view is that I feel like that castoreum note really sort of brings a leathery tone, a very subtle leathery tone to Absolute Aphrodisiac, as opposed to a more animalic quality. So I think that's really all I want to say about this one. I think it's an absolutely outstanding fragrance, and it's by Maurice Roucel. If you are wanting to stray further into the realm of trying things that have a bit more depth, a little bit more animalic kind of tones to it, then this is probably worth checking out, particularly if you are someone who likes vanilla and sweeter type fragrances. But I do have another one that I can recommend to you as well if you are somebody who likes the sweeter end of the spectrum, because I feel like this, again, this is one of those scenarios where if I was wearing this just on its own, I would consider this to be sweet, but when I have absolute aphrodisiac sprayed on one hand and this on the other, it doesn't really smell sweet at all in comparison. And so the other fragrance that I wanted to talk about, and which I just said I would recommend if you are someone who likes sweeter fragrances, is Tiger by Her Side by Jardin. This is a really lovely fragrance, and you can see I've barely touched it. I picked this up secondhand before we moved into this house, so it was probably either late 2020 or early 2021. And I picked it up. I'd been through a sample of it because I had the Discovery set of Jardin, and I really liked this one. And then I saw it come up in one of the Facebook groups. I picked it up thinking that I would wear it, and it kind of just got put in a drawer. And I think I must have picked it up before we moved house, and it probably just got packed away, and I never really thought about it again. And in fact, it wasn't until the other day that I thought about this one again. I can't remember. I'm not sure if I saw somebody post a video about it maybe, and maybe I saw it on a thumbnail, or maybe it was on Instagram or something like that. But anyway, I saw, I think, a picture of this and somewhere, and I just went, oh yeah, I'd forgotten I had that one. And immediately I just thought to myself, oh yeah, this is another fragrance. This is another amber that sort of fits into that animal fur kind of category. So I decided to pull it out, and lo and behold, I feel like it's a good one to talk to in this video, or in this little mini series of videos that I'm doing on ambers at the moment. So as I said, this is a lot sweeter than the other ambers that I've talked about, other than Absolute Aphrodisiac. I mean, that is just in its own spectrum. Let's just put that one in its own little bubble for now, and it's isolated. But if I think about this in comparison to Ombre 114, Bengal Rouge, and Musc Ravageur, I would say that this is sweeter than all of those. But I still compare this more closely to those versus Absolute Aphrodisiac, because again, Absolute Aphrodisiac has that very super sweet, sugary, very loud, projecting characteristic to it, whereas this still feels like it's much more natural, and it is strong and it's long lasting, and I can definitely smell it. You definitely get a scent bubble when you wear this, but I don't feel like it's super loud and projecting heaps like Absolute Aphrodisiac does. But I feel like this has a better lasting power, because it's sort of, even though it sits maybe closer to the body than Absolute Aphrodisiac does, it's like Absolute Aphrodisiac is like loud and proud for, you know, a couple of hours, and then it dies right back, whereas this just has more staying power. So the sweetness in here, and in fact I am wearing this one today, the sweetness in here to me almost smells like a candied spice or something. I talked before about Musc Ravageur, the sweetness reminding me of, you know, almost caramelized resins and you know, tacky resins, which also implies quite a bit of sweetness. But this is, you know, one step above that. It's not as tacky, I don't think, but it is candied. So there's maybe a bit more of a sugar element in here than Musc Ravageur. And I also get a lot of cinnamon in here. And it's interesting because lately I've started getting back into yoga, and when I finish my hot yoga class on a Saturday morning and then I go into my yin yoga class, I usually have a shower in between, obviously, and I will spritz a little bit of Ombre Narguil by AMBERS on for the yin class and then for the trip home. And I just have a little decant of that. And so when I pulled this out the other day, and after having worn Ombre Narguil fairly regularly for the last few months, I immediately sort of recognized a bit of a similarity between these two, even though they are completely different perfumes. So I wouldn't say that they smell the same, but they definitely have some similar characteristics. I think it's the cinnamon in here. This has just a lot of cinnamon, and I think it has Siam benzoin as well. I don't know if there's anything special about Siam benzoin or if it's particularly spicy, but I feel like this candied spicy sweetness I feel stems from that benzoin as much as it might some vanilla and maybe some other sweeter sugary notes as well. The other thing that I get in the opening of this one is I feel like I get a little bit of fruitiness, which I think also helps to impart some of that sort of really sweet vibe to it. And there is bergamot, I think, in the opening, but there's no other fruit, or at least no other fruit listed. And I do feel like I get a bit of a fruitiness to it, and it could very well be the bergamot, or juiciness, I think, is probably a more apt description, because it doesn't smell like fleshy fruit. It doesn't smell super fruity. It just feels a bit juicy and sweet. And then it sort of goes away in the mid, but then I get it again later in the dry down. So it's really interesting. And I have no idea what's making it behave that way. But maybe it's something to do with the bergamot, and also there's rose in here as well. So maybe there's a bit of sweetness coming through from that rose as well, which helps to give that light sort of sweetness in the base. In any case, I feel like these sort of light floral fruity notes that are in here, even though they're super subtle when compared to the more ambery tones in this fragrance, they impart a lightness to this amber and a bit of a freshness as well. So this amber doesn't feel quite as heavy as some of the others that I've talked about. And in fact, I would say that this feels even less heavy than Absolute Aphrodisiac, which to me is more candied sugar type of amber. And I certainly didn't feel like that had as much depth as, Musc Ravageur or Ombre 114. This one has lightness, but it still has a lot of complexity, and it still smells nice and natural and cozy. And again, I feel like I get a little bit of an animal fur kind of vibe, and I'm not sure. It must be one of the resins that they use in these amber accords that does that. I really need to get my hands on some raw ingredients, because I do have some myrrh oil and I have frankincense, but I think the essential oils are hard to compare to some notes just because they have a different characteristic about them. And when you're getting things like this fluffy animal fur, it's sort of hard to detect where that might come from. Maybe it is myrrh, I don't know, but it's fantastic. And so because you get that kind of animal fur bent to it, this one becomes really, really interesting, because it's got that candied spicy sweetness, it's got the lightness of that sort of juicy fruity floral element to it, but you've also got these resins in there that make it feel really natural and a little bit scratchy too, and I think there's patchouli in here. But then you also have this sort of slightly animalic bent to it, which makes it super interesting. It makes it very real and very inviting and very intoxicating, but still there's like this playful element to it that I really like. So overall, I would say that of all the ambers I've spoken about, this is probably the closest to Absolute Aphrodisiac out of all of them. But again, I feel like this has a much more natural feel to it. It's not overly sweet, even though there's a candied sort of sweetness to it. And I just find it's beautifully balanced, and I really, really enjoy wearing it. So I'll probably wear this a little bit now for the next few weeks, because I have rediscovered it and I'm really happy about it. And so there you have it. That is my comparison with Musc Ravageur, and also an additional comparison to Tiger by Her Side by Sana Jardin. And I hope that was helpful, and I apologise to whoever put in the original request, and they were probably, if they were watching that video, I apologise for two reasons really. One being that it took me so long to get around to doing this, and second of all, because I totally got the fragrance comparison wrong the first time around. But anyway, it's been an interesting exercise, because this has got me thinking about all the other ambers in my perfume wardrobe. So maybe I will do another amber video, not necessarily comparing it to Absolute Aphrodisiac, but I still have more ambers in there that I sort of stumbled across the other day going, oh yeah, I haven't worn that in a while either. So maybe I should do another one and just round out. This is like a 3-video series or something like that. Anyway, let me know if you've tried any of these, and if you have any thoughts or further additions that you would like to make in terms of that comparison with Absolute Aphrodisiac. We're all here to help each other. So if you have any additional thoughts that you think might help somebody to make that comparison, then I welcome you to include those in the comments below. Anyway, thank you so much for watching if you made it this far, and if you liked it, please do give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.